Hello, I'm Kat from the Austin Nature and Science Center. Thanks for joining me for this TEKS Tuesday video. Today we're going to learn about one of my favorite topics to learn about, animals. When you hear the word animals, what do you think of first? I think about things like pets that live in people's houses, like cats, dogs, lizards, and birds. Maybe you think about larger animals like elephants, alligators, and bears. And those are all great examples of animals, but did you know that there are millions of species of animals on the planet, and most of them are insects? Well, insects are pretty different from all the other animals we're looking at, so I wonder how they're similar. Insects, along with all other animals, have certain basic needs. This means that there are certain things that every single animal on the planet needs in order to survive. I wonder if you know what these things are already. You can pause and write them down if you want. But next, we're going to look at two very different kinds of animals and see what those basic needs look like for each of them. So the two very different animals we're going to consider today are a lion and a grasshopper. Just by looking at them, they don't seem to have very many similarities, but I bet if we focus on the things they need to survive, we can find a few. How do you think these two animals put energy into their body? How do we put energy into our bodies? By eating food. Lions and grasshoppers both have to eat food in order to get energy. The food that they eat might look pretty different since lions are carnivores and grasshoppers are herbivores, but they both eat food to get energy. What do we do when we're thirsty? We drink water. Do you think that lions and grasshoppers drink water too? Let's look at a picture of a domestic cat drinking from a bowl. I wonder if lions do that too. Well, here we can see one drinking from a river, a pond, or a stream, which they do in the wild. What about grasshoppers? Do you think grasshoppers drink from ponds? Or maybe they get their water a different way? I think that grasshoppers get most of their water from the plants that they eat because the plants are full of water. So even though it doesn't look the same, lions, grasshoppers, and humans all need water to survive. Do you think that having a place to find shelter is important for both of these animals? A grasshopper might want to find shelter to hide from a predator. Do you think that lions need to hide from predators? There aren't very many natural threats to them, so why else would they want to find shelter? Maybe the weather's really nasty and they need a way to get out of it. Well, what do we do when we need to find shelter? We can go into buildings like houses and apartments. So lions, grasshoppers, humans, and all of the other living animals on the planet have those three basic needs in common. They need food, water, and shelter in order to survive. And hopefully an animal's habitat will provide all of those three things for them. Given that there are millions of different kinds of animals, do you think there are lots of different kinds of habitats too? Next, we're going to look at a few different types of habitats and find out how animals get their needs met there. So what does an animal that lives in a really cold place look like? Maybe they're really fuzzy and colored white to blend in with snow? What about a really hot place? Maybe they're more sand colored and have big ears that help them get rid of heat? What about a really wet place? Maybe they don't have lots of fur that would get soaked and make them even heavier? And what about a really dry place? Maybe they have parts of their body that store extra energy because it's hard to find food and water. So other than having different characteristics that we can see on the outside, do you think that these animals might behave differently too in order to have their needs met? We're going to focus on a cold environment first to explore that some more. Animals that live in really cold places might have some characteristics that we can easily spot, like thick fur on their bodies and extra fat stores to keep them warm. But do you think there are ways that these animals might behave differently since they live in these really cold places? Maybe you've heard the word dormancy before. Dormancy is a period when an organism slows down drastically or even stops things like growth, physical activity, and metabolic activity, which is when their body turns food into energy on the inside. All of this slowing down and stopping is meant to conserve the energy that these animals already have. And interestingly, there are lots of different kinds of organisms that go through some periods of dormancy. There are plants, animals, and even bacteria that go through dormancy. There are several types of dormancy that some animals go through. We can think of dormancy as like an umbrella term. So under this dormancy umbrella, there are several examples like torpor, estivation, diapause, and brumation, and maybe even one you've heard of, hibernation. Hibernation is a sort of dormancy that's meant to help animals survive really long and harsh winters, kind of like this. Can you think of animals that you've heard of that hibernate before? Well, interestingly, plants actually go into a kind of dormancy in conditions like this too, where they kind of go to sleep and shut off and they stop producing things that would turn into food for lots of animals. So in a response to this food shortage and really cold temperatures, animals will go into hibernation, and from the outside it looks like they're just going to sleep. But really there are lots of changes happening on the inside too. These animals will lower their heart rate and their internal temperature and really decrease their metabolism. All of these changes make it easier for them to survive this winter because they can exist at lower temperatures and they can use way less energy. Let's switch up our environments now and think about how animals survive really harsh and long summers. In really hot areas that go a long time without water or experience lots of drought, animals go through a type of dormancy called estivation. Estivation is meant to retain water inside the body and also help conserve energy, kind of like hibernation. Some animals that estivate include snails, who can basically seal themselves inside their shells, desert tortoises, salamanders, and frogs, who will estivate in burrows underground where it's cooler and more moist, and it's even thought that some mammals estivate. There are two examples. There is the fat-tailed dwarf lemur and the African hedgehog. It's pretty cool to think about mammals behaving this way too. Instead of entering some type of dormancy to deal with not having their needs met, some species of animal will actually just get up and leave and travel long distances to get to habitats that will meet their needs. This is called migration. Some animals you might be familiar with that migrate include lots of flying things like birds and insects like the monarchs, but there are also animals who travel across land to migrate, including the caribou and wildebeest. Each of these species travel hundreds of miles at a time to leave habitats that are not meeting their needs to get to ones that are. Usually they're in search of food and water mostly. So it turns out that lots of characteristics of animals, including how they look and the way that they behave, has a lot to do with how they're able to get their needs met. Remember that all living animals need food, water, and shelter in order to survive, and a good habitat will provide all three of those. But if an animal is in a place where its needs are not being met, they can do things like go into periods of dormancy or even migrate away until they can get their needs met again. Well, I hope you had fun learning with me today. I'll see you next time. Head over to our Facebook page to see more awesome daily videos posted.